Now, I think that that's really magnificent, and that if we look deeply, we can begin to recognize that actually, for example, just to run this trend a little bit further, that all true art really accomplishes that same end. If you think of the greatest works of music, the greatest accomplishments of sculpture, the most moving lines of poetry, the reason that they move us is not merely because of their technical skill, but because of how they transmit that power of the divine which each one of us ultimately, intuitively remembers that we're seeking. That when I look upon Michelangelo's La Pietà, of Mother Mary holding her recently deceased Jesus in her arms, I don't think of the technical skill that it conveys in looking at it. That's not what moves me. But what moves me is the promise of immortality, that greatness of the life of that avatar, of course. And even similarly, when we listen to the greatest works of Beethoven or Bach, each one of them are composed in either direct or indirect worship of infinity. And that truly is the nature of those great works. That was very beautiful. I listened to an interview from Yo-Yo Ma, one of the world's greatest classical cellists, and someone asked him, when you play the Bach Cello Suite No. 6, how can you resist bursting out into jubilation? It's such a beautiful and joyful piece of music. And Yo-Yo Ma said, well, I am bursting forth in jubilation. I'm just doing it through the music. Because that's the nature of that music. That's its essence. That's what it's trying to communicate, is the very joy of God. And that if someone attunes to it with high enough energy, that is what they discover. Yo-Yo Ma feels that the essence of that music is joy. That's one of the 8 aspects of God, is joy. We all feel moved by Aslan in that story when he roars and all of a sudden all the dead resurrect, because we feel that power and that promise of God. That even, for example, in that Christmas carol that we sing every year, about peace on earth and goodwill to men, I heard the bells on Christmas Day. It's a beautiful piece of poetry that was actually written by a man who lost both of his sons to the Civil War and his wife died. And in the midst of that, he writes this beautiful piece of poetry that's asking, is there goodness on earth? Is there any virtue? Is there anything worth fighting for? Or is everything that we've fought for and lost for and bled for meaningless? And if you recall, just remember the last verse of that triumphant song. Then tolled those bells both loud and deep, God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, and peace on earth, goodwill to men. When I read those lines of poetry, they move me almost to tears every year when we come back to it and I sing it again. I can barely make it through that song. And I sing those lyrics over and over and over again. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. And it's a combination of 8 little words. Why do they move us so? Because our hearts recognize that behind those words is what we're ultimately seeking, is the infinite Christ, is our own true potential.